Well, there are a lot of reasons that men are falling behind in this country, but a look at the numbers reveals one statistic that tracks the decline of American men almost precisely over time: the disappearance of fathers from the home. Between 1960 and 2016, the proportion of kids living with both parents decreased by almost 20%. The percentage of children living with only their mothers nearly tripled. In demographic terms, this is stunning. Changes to family structure this abrupt and profound typically are only seen in wartime. And yet, if anything, those numbers understate the reality of fatherlessness in America. In the high-income neighborhoods where journalists and policymakers tend to live, not a lot has changed. Most kids there still grow up with their fathers and mothers. But in the rest of the country, intact families are disappearing. According to a 2014 study by researchers at Johns Hopkins University, among younger parents without college degrees, 74% of mothers had at least one child outside of marriage. Out-of-wedlock births are now the rule across the country, not the exception. Increasingly, having a father at home is a sign of affluence, but it is also a cause of affluence, especially for boys. Boys who grow up with a father at home earn much more as adults. Boys who grow up alone with their mothers tend to earn less. They also have more disciplinary problems in school. They read less and less well. They're less likely to graduate from high school or go to college. They are more likely to be unemployed and to live in poverty. They get married less often, and when they do, they divorce more. They're more likely to be obese and to have asthma. They are far more likely to abuse alcohol and drugs, exhibit antisocial behavior, and commit acts of violence. As adults, they're twice as likely to go to prison. Now, these numbers aren't the result of one study, but of numerous large studies done over generations. The results hold true across geography and ethnic groups, white and black, urban and rural. They're always true. Boys raised without their fathers are at terrible risk. There is not much serious academic debate about that, if any. The nationwide breakup of families is a disaster, and not just a moral disaster, but a practical one. It may be the largest public health crisis that we face. So what's driving it? Well, there are many factors. Falling male wages certainly play a role. Studies show that when men make less than women in their potential dating pool, women tend to consider them less attractive marriage partners. Fewer men marry, more children are born out of wedlock. Some government policies also discourage marriage, particularly among the poor. Women on welfare who marry often see their food and housing subsidies cut dramatically. One recent report found that almost 1/3 of Americans know someone who hasn't married for fear of losing benefits. Broader changes in American culture have also had an effect on marriage and family formation. The dramatic decline in church attendance and religious observance is one of these. There are probably other reasons, too. Fatherlessness is a hugely complex problem. But the point is, it is a problem, a massive one. And what is remarkable is how rarely that is acknowledged in public. When was the last time you heard a Democratic office holder decry the out-of-wedlock birth rate? If you cared about reducing poverty, you would talk about it a lot. But they don't. Why is that? Well, exit polling answers that question. Unmarried mothers are a critical part of the Democratic coalition. In 2008, Barack Obama won 74% of single mothers who voted. In 2012, he won 75%. Alienating these voters in any way is politically risky for Democrats, and so they ignore the problem entirely. Over time, the progressive left has become openly hostile to the institution of marriage. Once again, voting patterns explain why. It's been more than 20 years since a Democrat running for president won the majority of married women in America. Unmarried women, by contrast, vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. In 2012 and 2016, the Democratic Party platform never mentioned the importance of marriage except when advocating for gay marriage. In 2013, as she was preparing to run for president, Hillary Clinton shot a video tribute to single mothers. Quote, "Single moms are the real heroines," she said. "They need even more of the help that grandparents, aunts and uncles, and good friends can provide." The one group that Hillary didn't mention? Biological fathers. Democrats who stray from this script tend to get attacked. Barack Obama spoke regularly and often eloquently about the importance of fatherhood. And yet, consistent with his party's orthodoxy, he said almost nothing about men marrying the mothers of their children. And that distinction is critical. Studies show that married fathers are by far most involved in their children's lives. You often hear our leaders refer to caring parents or grandparents or caregivers or some similar combination, as if the presence of any involved adult is enough for kids. But that's not true. At least for boys, the presence of a biological father in the house makes all the difference. On at least one occasion, Obama suggested that he understood this. In a 2003 speech about gun violence he gave in Chicago, Obama noted that, quote, "we should do more to promote marriage." Almost immediately, he was attacked from the left. An article in Ebony magazine suggested that Obama's remarks were racist. MSNBC ran an op-ed attacking him, and so on. He went back to platitudes. Hillary Clinton was right about one thing. Being a single mother is difficult. A lot of single mothers work incredibly hard, and they ought to be admired for that. But that doesn't mean that single motherhood is a good idea for society. It's not. It's a tragedy, especially for boys. And the rest of us ought to stop lying about that. Dr. Warren Farrell has looked into this subject quite closely. He's the author of the book, The Boy Crisis, and he joins us tonight. Dr. Farrell, thanks a lot for coming on. So we know pretty conclusively that men in America and in other developed countries are falling behind women in a lot of different measures. To what extent is fatherlessness driving that, do you think?
A great extent. They're falling behind women in all 63 leading nations, developed nations. And in developed nations, there's the permission for divorce that there isn't in non-developed, less developed nations. And also in developed nations, there's the permission for women to marry, to have children without being married. And that creates a huge division between boys and a division of boys who are with their fathers do quite well. Boys who are not with their fathers do terribly on more than 70 different measures of measures like postponed gratification, the ability to be, whether or not they're depressed, whether or not they're drinking, whether or not they have drugs, the opioid crisis, and even the people who are involved as ISIS recruits all over the world, they're almost completely fatherless boys, and the ones that are girls are also fatherless. And so everything you've been saying for this series has been right on target with the importance of having children be involved with both fathers. Mothers are doing a huge amount of wonderful, hard work, loving and caring for their children. That's why they deserve the biological father to be involved. And when we tell the biological father, not only are you important, but the way that you father is important, the way that you enforce boundaries, the way that you encourage exploration, the way that you encourage kids to get up and try again, the way that you encourage adventure and risk-taking, the way that, that we can play together and create bonds. These are the things that mothers need to communicate, because when fathers are asked for and valued, they come back into the picture. When they're not, they drop out.
So it doesn't sound like anybody wins from fatherlessness. So if, you know, the trend is that fewer families are forming, more children are growing up without fathers at home, nobody benefits from that at all. Why aren't we sounding an alarm in this society about that, do you think?
I think we put so much focus, especially in the Democratic Party, on freedom for women. And freedom for women is a wonderful thing. I was in the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City, as you know, for many years. But freedom for women stops when they make the free choice to have children. And then a different question has to emerge, which is what is best for the children. And what we see is evidence way beyond what I ever expected before I started doing the research for the Boy Crisis, is that children do best when there is not just a father, not just a male role model, but the biological father, and a biological father is far less likely to drop out of the process when there's marriage. 40% of even men and women who live together, who don't get married and have children, 40% of those fathers never see their children after 2 years.
Those are numbers that will offend people, but that's what the science tells us, and it's obvious all around us. I appreciate that, Doctor. Thanks for coming on and for that perspective.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.